Well, basically, I'd like to go ahead and summarize what Negative had to say. Basically, I narrowed it down to 3 points. First of all, he outlined something that I believe Lyndon B. Johnson said. He said that 4 years is too long a term if you have a bad president, and 4 years is too short of a term if you have a good president. So that's why he's saying re-election matters. Well, here's the thing. There's always a chance to have a bad president. And if 4 years is too long of a time to have a bad president, as we all know, I'm sure many of you think that George Bush was a terrible president. Or some of you might think that Obama is a terrible president. You're like, finally, he's going to get kicked out of office. The point I'm trying to make is that there's always going to be somebody who thinks that the president is bad. We're always going to have disapproval ratings. There's never going to be a 100% approval rating. Something you might want to know, though, is that in the beginning of a president's term, nearly unanimously, is ridiculously high approval ratings. George Bush, for instance, had a 90% approval rating in September 21 of 2001, the first year he was elected. And at the end of his term, he had a 71% disapproval rating. So basically, if there's a bad president, well, that sucks. But there's another thing, too. If we have a bad president, I mean, sure, we have a bad president. But if we have a president that's actually trying to vie for power and is ignoring the people, like he said, then think about it this way. There's this thing called the right to impeachment, and that's left in the hands of the House, not in the hands of the people. The people just get to get rid of the president after 4 years. But if the president is doing vastly bad things in the time that he's in office, then of course he's going to be impeached. That power doesn't go away. Then he started talking about how the president wouldn't be connected to the people. This is related to the last part. But basically, we have interest groups. I don't know if you people have heard of these things, but they're kind of these things that they mess up these sort of ideals, and then they go in and they try to pass laws to support their own ideals. And then, how do you think they got into office in the first place? Like I said, Bush had a 90% approval rating in his first year in office. Look, I mean, they have to get the public's attention and interest in order to be elected for president. And then they get to go for 6 years, and then they're gone. And that's because there's this thing called the second-term blues. Now, the second-term blues are basically, it's a little wordplay on the second terms. The problem with second terms is that there have been 15 presidents who received a second term. That's actually 36% of the presidents. Now, none of those terms, not a single one, has been more successful than their first term. That's according to historian Richard Dallek. And basically, he goes on to say that a president they start overreaching things. For instance, if you look at FDR, he tried to court Pat. If you look at Nixon, he didn't even get to a second term, but he actually cheated just to get there. They start overreaching their bounds. They've been there for too long, and they're stressed out by the whole re-election campaign. We want the president to be there to work. We don't want the president to think about re-election, and there's a reason for that. If you think about it, then you've got 2 years of being president, where you don't have to worry about re-election, and then you've got 2 years of worrying about re-election. Now that's 2 years worth of work and 2 years worth of trying to do anything to get the public's attention. Like, hey, look, I did that. Hey, look at what I did. That turns us into this sort of quick reaching goal society. And we can't have that for some of the problems that we have today. For instance, there are bombs that the president has control over that could destroy entire countries in seconds. Are we really going to put him in the position to where he's going to have to make these snap judgments while also thinking about how the public is going to react to his decision? If, for instance, God forbid, New York City was nuked, and then the president was looked at and he's like, are you going to bomb the people who did this? We don't want the president to think, well, what does the public think about New York being nuked? What if he nuked Iran, who happened to nuke us just in this hypothetical situation, and then Iran started bombing us again? And then this would cause a cascade climate. We don't need a cascade climate. What we need is a president who can focus on his job and not worry about what people are saying to him. Now, finally, we've got this whole media debate going on here about how the president gets free media and then how other people get free media. Look, The president gets a lot of media, sure. And whether or not that media is good or bad, that's really just relative to who the president is and how people feel about him. But the thing is that if the president's getting a lot of media for good things that he's done, that's pretty bad because then no one can run against him. Because, I mean, a lot of people think that Obama is just going to get the presidency without any chance of anybody else getting it because there's such a positive tone over him. But then there's people who thought that Carter, for instance, Jimmy Carter, was never going to get the presidency because of how terrible a president he was. Well, I actually got a quote from Jimmy Carter that says, a president who is not trusted cannot be effective. If re-election pressures subvert credibility and foster skepticism, the presidency is continually undermined, therefore precluding effective government. We don't want to go 2 years into a presidency and start having the other side start saying, hey, look at how crappy of a president he is. Hey, look at this thing he did wrong. Hey, look at this thing he did wrong. All right? The media does enough of that. We don't need people actually trying to get him out of office in 2 years and bringing those up early. The president can't afford to not have public interest. And this creates an unfair thing because these people aren't just commenting on what the president is doing. They're actually trying to find these negative things. Sure, you could say that the media might be trying to find things that Obama did wrong, but it's not the same. They're not trying to get into his job, so they're not trying to subvert him, unlike someone like, let's say, Newt Gingrich would, or along those lines. And basically, those were the points. And then we go to the final thing that Lewis said, which was that if a president is good, he gets reelected, and he gets to stay there for 8 years. And and he says that 6 years is actually not a long enough time. Well, who's to say 8 years is a long enough time, especially when 4 of those years are concentrated on reelection? You don't want this sort of thing to start overwhelming our society just because we have to think about what the people are interested in. We need the president to be able to be the president and do what we elected him to do.